On our 48-foot Navigator, it did not come with side rails, which makes it challenging when you're trying to tend to fenders, stepping over fenders. You need both hands. You can't let go if there's wind and there's waves, and then attending to lines. It's not safe. So we are going to show you how we install side rails on the Elli-Yacht.
Join us on the Elli-Yacht as we realize our 5-year plan with the kids grown up, moved out, graduated from college. We take the dog, sold everything, and kitted out the boat so we can cruise the Pacific Northwest, all while living and working in the heart of Seattle. And we're off to S3 that's going to put the rails on the boat. So we're just going to clear the Ballard Bridge. We're heading west just before the locks. Pull into a slip there. They're going to wedge us into a spot between a couple boats. I think we should fit fine. But they have really nice docks, beautiful concrete docks and nice power and all that. So being a liveaboard when you have work done on your boat, it's a little bit more of a challenge, but we'll be staying on the boat this time. Usually we go grab a cheap hotel room that has a bathtub that Carlin can enjoy, but not this time. We're going to stay on the boat. So let me see. As we get into this project, some things that are super important to us. We want the rails to look like the factory rails. That means the same angle, the same diameter of tubing, the welds to look identical, as well as the feet being screwed in. That's going to be important to us. S3 is really, it looks like they've listened really well. Frankly, this is our first time working with them, so fingers crossed it works out well. However, I will say the reason that we even selected them is because
we were at a rendezvous and someone had rails put on, and we're like, huh, that's a good idea. We should do that.
Yeah. And thanks to a pandemic, and they got them done probably 9 years ago, it cost twice as much for us to do it. It's gross, but it is a safety issue, so
I'm going to feel a lot safer walking around the boat.
There you go. That's what matters. Now, by the way, this is the spring, and we're still getting some flooding and stuff, and we have logs and all kinds of flotsam in even Ship Canal. It's crazy.
I know. I see
get a picture of that. It's nuts. That's huge. We're coming up close.
Yeah.
So we'll give them a call.
Let's go tie up.
Let's do that. So Navigators didn't come with a burgee stanchion, so we're having one added. So the mast will go on the front for the burgee, and it just has a section right there that they pulled out. At the same time, we are having the port side rail pulled off and rebedded. We did the starboard side last year because there was some damage it had sustained, and we had it done. But one thing I've learned is when you have the opportunity, rebed things, it goes fast, it's not that much overhead, and otherwise it will leak at the least opportune time and you'll have to tear it all apart. So this makes sense to just do now while we have the opportunity before the rails go on. So we don't have any soft spots. We went through and looked at each one of these. That's good, but you can see we were getting corrosion underneath the pads on the rails. So it's a good time to get this done and make sure that we don't have any future penetration. But I'm pleased that it looks like we don't have any issues with soft spots or water penetration. Again, the boat's 12 years old, so it is time to have this done. About every 10 years, rebedding your hardware makes a lot of sense. Now the team cleaned all of the old caulking off, tidied everything up, recalked, and started the rebedding process. Here's our integrated burgee mast. They did a really nice job of this. That's a through hole, so no water collects inside the rail. It's just a nice upgrade. A lot of these Navigators in the California area were meant to be floating condos, and so they didn't want to have rails on the side and mess up their salon view out of their glazing or their windows here. So they just didn't put them on. Not to mention, it costs money. Probably a lot less than what we're paying to retro them on, just like any retrofit on a boat. But this is what it looks like without the rails. It's pretty nice. The factory option actually had extremely high rails. They matched the height of up to the bow, and you can kind of see as a glimpse through these blinds here how tall that would be. So when you kind of step back and look at that, they would have been right up tall, right at almost the top of the window. You know, I think you get used to it. I don't think it was that big of a deal, but let's see what it looks like when they do the test fit and what it looks like against the windows. So here's the first port side rail coming down. The team came to our marina and measured out all of the rails and where the stanchion would land on the gunwale, as well as where it's going to connect to the forward rail. So this is really the first time they've had an opportunity to fit it to the boat and ensure that everything lined up appropriately. Pretty pleased with how it looks. We have that drop down with our bullnose on the front of the boat down to the lower part of the gunwale. The Navigator used 1.1 1/8 for all of the rails, which is non-standard. It's 1 inch or 1.25 inches. So we had to go out and procure that, which is very difficult to find. And because of COVID, there was nothing that was already pre-polished, so they had to have all of the stock polished before they put it together. We wanted it to match up. So they're marking out where they're going to drill into the gunnel on the boat. The challenge is there's no access whatsoever on the underside to be able to do a through bolt and a plate underneath. But that's the way the entire front rail is installed as well. They're basically just self-tapping screws right into the meat of the fiberglass, which is super thick. It's about 1.5 inches in this area. However, it cracks the gel coat when you use self-tappers into gel coat. Even if you do a countersink, which most yards know to do that, it will still crack over time. In fact, we have some instances of that on the boat after 12 years. So what they're doing, something I haven't seen before, they're drilling in to the fiberglass, and then they do a tap in a drill. And then once they do that, they just run a machine screw into this instead of a self-tapping screw, which obviously has a lot less pressure on the fiberglass and definitely on the gel coat, so it doesn't crack. Definitely going to be doing that in the future whenever I bed or rebed any new hardware on the boat. It'll actually flare slightly outward, which will give you more room as you're walking down the gunnel, because it's just narrow on the side gunnel decking. So after they've marked everything out, the team goes through and starts drilling out guide holes. The next step from here is they're going to do that tap into the fiberglass and through the gel coat. Again, they're going to put machine screws through those holes, which will create a lot less pressure than the self-tapping ones. Obviously, in a perfect world, we do through bolts with a plate in the back. Again, there's no access to these areas, so everything is about compromises on the boat, and this is the way that we had to attack this, although it looks like it's sound.
Today they installed it, they drilled the holes, put it in, but the last thing that they need to do is weld this part to the original bow rail is installed on the boat. The other thing they're going to do is they're going to take another piece like this and weld it from here to here and put another one of these and attach it here so that it will all be complete. And then tomorrow we'll take the boat out, turn it around so that they can do it on the starboard side.
So the final welds will now be done. So you can see that it's really just cut and hanging there now that it's been mounted. But the weld will look like this. S3 was one of the few places, well, frankly, it was the only place that I could find somebody that would weld the rails onto the existing rails so that they were fully integrated. This is where the rubber hits the road. He tacks up these rails, and then after making sure they look right, finishes the welds.
This part is done. Now we'll turn the boat around and do the same thing on the starboard side.
We got a little bit wider of a shot to give you context, but we had about 1.5 feet at the bow of the boat and about the same at the stern. So after we turned the boat around, the Dockmate really makes this easy to just move the boat sideways. Again, we only have a bow thruster, and the Dockmate, well, just with the push of the joystick, also puts the engines into a turn, as well as moving the bow thruster, which steps the boat sideways. Pretty slick. This is the new view from inside the slalom with the rails, and they don't look too obtrusive. The factory ones were about 6 inches taller, so they really cut into the view. So for the port rail, it's a rinse and repeat. The team is going through, they test fit, trimmed the forward rail, did the guide holes, as well as tapped for machine screws, and it took about half the time, just like any custom job the second time around.
Last piece is put on. The last thing to do is weld this piece on, and once that is done, we are done. And we've got rails. I'm excited.
And now for the final weld. Alright, the railings are now installed. They're looking great. So we're going to coil up the power cord and head back to our home berth. And we have a busy day. We need to get the whaler splashed back in because we had all the maintenance done for it this week. And have Ballard Marine Fabricators fix our broken schedule. I have to tell you, these docks and the facilities have been absolutely beautiful. That is 120-foot Nordhavn in the background there. If you are a Nordhavn fan, that's the largest produced Nordhavn to date. They have a cool YouTube video on bringing it over from Hong Kong to Canada on its own bottom. You know, kind of fun what you run into. It's been a successful installation, and the folks at S3, top notch. I hadn't had a chance to work with them, but really pleased with the work that they've done. I'll put a link below to one of their sales reps if you have anything you need done, because they do all the things.
At the end of the day, we were blessed with a beautiful rainbow over the Elli-Yacht. Now that we have the handrails on, it's going to be so much safer for John and me and the dog. I can still hang on to the handrail, but having these side rails is going to be amazing because I can actually walk down, the dog can walk down, and everyone's going to feel safe. I don't have to step over fenders, I can tend to fenders, I don't have to worry about them hanging over and stepping over them. I can still tend to the lines, and I feel 100% safe. So this is going to be awesome. I can't wait for this season, and thank you for subscribing, and if you haven't, you should, because we're awesome.